Your current business partner now was working at a large recruitment firm.
Correct. So we used to meet every month, and one of the months he, comes out and meets us, and he was a bit ranty, and I said, what's going on with you? And he said, well, I had a guy working for me, and he placed a candidate in with a large Australian company, and ultimately it turns out that the candidate he placed there had falsified his references. So had never done what he said he was going to do.
And he just put his mate's phone number or his friend's numbers
No,
as
it was even
references,
worse than that, because essentially the recruiter had completely made it up, hadn't even contacted the references. So he'd made it up and then put them in front of it. So he'd spent his morning recovering the account, and then obviously, the guy then exits stage left. And then, so we had a, customary lunch.
Wait, so the recruiter that was trying to place...
Had placed
a
month
made
before.
up the references.
Correct.
So not the person that wanted the job, the actual person that worked at the recruitment firm.
Yes.
Oh, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he'd rescued the account.
I can understand falsifying your own CV. If it's
exactly. Giving your mate down the pub. It's like, hello. Yeah. So and then what happened was I said, well, let's work this out. And he was sitting there. I said, well, it's probably not a cup of coffee time. Let's have a glass of wine. So we had a glass of wine and sat there, and I suppose a glass of wine left to a bottle of wine, and then we just talked through it. And I said, well, we could probably do this in a way of technology. And he said, well, we could do it like this. And I went, well, why don't we? And we talked through it. So we did a bottle of wine. I think we did 2 bottles of wine, actually. It was quite a long lunch. And I still have the bit of paper. We mapped out what we were going to do. And I said, well, fuck it. Let's just do it. It'll be fun. What's the worst that can happen? And that's literally the conversation we had at the end of 2010.
So you got the idea to build Xref because of that issue that happened.
Absolutely.
To Lee.
Again, the best things, best startups and the best companies
come from
a problem, solving a problem.
Yeah.
And who'd have thought it was a problem, right?
Well, it was a problem for Lee. It's a life problem.
Yeah.
And Lee, luckily he had you, helped him find the positive.
Absolutely.
And then look at you now. And so just because I don't know if we've spoken so much about what Xref actually does, but it actually, do you want to describe it? Wait,
yeah, so
I had a great thing written down. I knew it, but it said it better here.
I can't say it.
No, but I want to do it.
Okay.
Xref is a globally
it's easy for you to say.
Reference checking software. That's what it is. It's a reference checking software.
So it's pre-employment referencing. So when you go and get a job and you change your job, typically someone will pick the phone up, traditionally pick the phone up and ring one of your ex-employees to say, did they do the job? Were they any good? Were they a total knob or, things like that. And invariably what happened is Bob would give his mates Johnny's down the pub, and you never know who it is because everyone lives on a mobile phone, right? So there's no governance, there's no security, you don't know what you're going to be saying, So ultimately what we've done is we've built a cloud-based platform that is a fully automated pre-employment referencing platform.
It can figure out if their references, if they're falsified the references.
Yeah, because it's all based upon, of the millions of transactions that have gone through the platform over the years, we know what a typical example looks like that runs through the platform. So we have an algorithm that looks at sort of those external points if it's outside of boundaries.
It catches the outliers.
Absolutely. And that's what you're trying to do. So our job is not to catch, our job is to find highly referenceable people. I get a random phone call from this guy. There's a buddy of mine I used to go to school with. And he was working for like a Regis, shed. And he said, I've got this American company in here. They were a large venture capital company called Benchmark Capital. So they're the money behind eBay and Cisco and Palm and a lot of these companies, and a bit of early Uber and bits. And I spent 6 years then working for them. I probably sat over that 6-year period in maybe 600-700 presentations across that time, or privy to them. And I think the interesting thing is that
pitches, you mean? Pitch decks, yeah.
Pitch decks and things, yeah. And getting involved in some of the early stage company was great, and I love startups. We'd have some cracking ideas come across, and you go, "That's brilliant," but the team wasn't great. And then some rubbish ideas would come across, but the team is really good. And I'd sort of say to the senior partners, what's the difference in this? And they said, well, here's the thing. A cohesive team that is driven will build some. This might fail, but we'll get them on the second one. One of the things they did really, really well was have people that helped the companies get to where they needed to get a great bit investing in those companies, not just at a fiscal level or a technology level, but would actually help them mold themselves to become better leaders and better scalers and put them in touch with people. What they did was to say, well, here's a portfolio company and they've been on the same journey as you, so go and learn from them. So ultimately, there were companies that used to take money but didn't need the money. They just wanted the network, which is really interesting.
No,
it's a great, amazing.
They're smart people. They know that the network's more important. It is so easy to raise capital.
Yeah.
It is so easy. The amount
where you are, but yeah.
In this country, in most first world countries, it's easy to raise capital. I've seen some of the dumbest companies I've ever seen, run by some of the dumbest people I've ever seen, raise capital at a valuation that made no sense and was just brought out of thin air, but they've raised capital. Because there's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing investing as well. Money's easy to get. It's the network that is hard to get.
And execution.
Execution comes after anyway, but having a good network is going to help you execute better anyway. Money is not. Money is going to help you execute poorly.
But the other side of it is, you say you can raise money, right? But the problem that you have with a lot of people that raise money at the moment is they get these either ridiculous foundation. Everyone goes, oh, I'm going to do a startup, I'm going to raise money, but they get diluted. By the time they've done, seed fund and seed round and an angel round,
they don't even own the company
and
anymore.
You go, well, you're going to get to the end of this journey and own 5%. Yeah. That's crap. If you're putting your family's future or your future on this, you've got to have some outcome at the end of it. So you've got to learn to, as you say, if you do the hard yards and the bootstrap, you'll value it more as opposed to spending all your time building pitch decks. Just start it. Just do it.
What were some of the things that companies with good pitches would do as opposed to companies with bad?
They kept it simple. They could talk about the product. They could talk about who's going to use it, why they would use it, and what eventual cash flow looked like and what they needed. You can go through all the market, dynamics and the size of the market and, 70-page PowerPoints. They never look at that. I've got the attention span of a flea, but, I'm a great believer in if you can't communicate to me on one page, give me a single page on something or just put it on a whiteboard because I'm a visual person, then what's the point? It's too complicated. And people get simplicity. So if you're a public company, everything's open world, right? Like you can look at our accounts and that the insurances are in place. That there's director's insurance. The fact that there's fund, there is capital there. It's not just a couple of guys that have got a server in a garage somewhere, right? It's a proper company with the governance itself at the top of it, which was important for us as we began to scale.
Well, what I love what you said is you looked at all the different options and the values each of them give. You didn't need the private investors because you're already profitable. You didn't need the cash to get profitable. You already were that.
Yeah.
So the private investors you didn't need. You didn't need the VCs because you weren't looking for a network.
And also we were too far advanced for them because what they wanted to do, what they like doing is taking money in the early stage companies so they can take a bigger chunk, right?
100%. And then you looked at listing the company, and not only would that give you the amount of money you needed to scale, but it also gives you that social proof, that legitimacy where these big companies
to grow up.
Yeah, but it's that legitimacy. If I'm a big company and I'm dealing with a publicly listed company, I'm going to feel more confident dealing with you than I am a private company, unless that private company has been owned for 100 years and it's that type of company.
Yeah. I like the fact that there's a governance level that sits over the top of it. I like the fact that, yes, we have a range of shareholders, right? And we've got quite a few institutions that are invested in us. I've still got 20% of the company, so the regulatory element is there, and I just think it's a nice way to run a business. And is it risky? Yes, because at the end of the day, you're the guy on the hook. Would I do it again? Absolutely. We look at it and say that the governance and the risk levels are completely contained. And ultimately, what I want to always do is do the right thing, right? So, we've got an internal legal counsel. We do everything by the book. Absolutely everything by the book, which is really, really important, right? And, it has its ups and downs, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it because I'm learning a lot, right?
What are the negatives?
The governance, the lawyers, the institutional investors.
Additional expenses?
Yeah, expenses.
It's more expensive to run a public company.
We reckon it adds three to 500K a year onto the running of the business.
That's not too bad, though.
It's not huge, no. And we were only a micro cap at the end of the day. Ultimately, it's something that I'd never done. So I'm enjoying the journey. And so for me to say I'd do it again, absolutely. Because I think the interesting thing is I've learned, because my inquisitive nature, I've learned a lot about capital raising, ASX, governance, all of that side of thing. And I'll tell you what, mate, there's a bit for disruption around some of that as well.